Okay, now we're recording. Okay.
That's not bad. Good looking out.
This is one of the clear. Okay. That's what it's, yeah.
Next, you want to start first? Sure, why not? Let's do it. You go with it.
Ma'am, I think there, you just, please, oh, there it is. He's there.
I gave you two handouts. And I think they're very probably giving you some to. Handouts I give you are the detailed items that make up the budget on this. And the other printout is the active, or excuse me, the actual cost to date versus the budget for this year. Because the sheets that show the actual costs were put together probably a month and a half ago. So the updated costs are in this Munis report in column 5. So we've got finance budget first on top of the data processing on this sheet for the individual expenses. And the tables have all been projected for 2024. And there's details of those available. These tie out to what the mayor has in the Google Sheets. The overtime plan. You have 2 health insurance buyouts, and the top portion of that is 23.92% of the totals. They go to finance, and the balance is down in data processing at 76.8%, 08%. No separation pay plan for me because there isn't any for managers for next year. Office supplies, $2,500. That's the amount. Right now we're at 1,095 versus 25 budget, so it should be under. As much we close out the year. The telephone, I've got that budget at 8,115. It's tracking pretty close to that this year. It looks like it'll close out at that. I had it a little bit higher in the projections. You can see in the sheet at 8,025. The next set of information is contract services that we have to take. First group this year is the GASB 75 interim report, so it's a 3,150 amount as opposed to about 7,300, 7,200. Cathedral, we estimate 3,675 for doing the property tax invoicing for the printing and files. We have maintenance fees, small amounts for T-Value, which is a transportation program, HVAC updates every year for the office units. We have to get the filters cleaned and service. And then county website costing the shared service. And we also have some additional media services that we pay for there. I think that's the website for the county or not.
Well,
Archive
Social is our required social media archiver. We are required as a municipality for FOIL requests and for document storage, which is considered commenting and posts on social media. We need to retain that information. That's what this is.
And so that's an allocated cost to all the departments. We didn't charge back. I think that actually does the allocation. Printing and copying, we get SimQuest managed printing contract, Tyler Technologies printed stock that usually is more surcharges or something. Printing supplies, other receipt ribbons, etc. $700. Printing paper, color paper, forms $500. So that makes it that line item. Fees for services, annually we have to report to the SEC about our outstanding bonds, so that's the new step. 250. Filing, title searches, legal fee, publications, foreclosure issues, that's $2,500 in there. Shredex, that's our document records, shredding, and merchant service fees. That's when the CRA usually charges us back for credit card charges that don't work out. That's the fees for it. Can't tell you. Postage, it's an estimated amount. For mailing or AP payments and general correspondence, 2,300. Mail notices for delinquent taxes and utilities, usually cathedral, property tax invoice and postage. Put that all together, it's 900, and that's the operating budget for next year for the finance office. This year we budgeted 449 revised, 455. So we're going to be up to 478. Most of that is an increase in salaries. We have a new position for the whole year. I'm in there for the whole year as well for next year, depending on when I leave. Could get a benefit if I leave early. Surplus. Okay. Down in data processing, it's the employees once again for the detailed schedule. And in data processing, there's also a chargeback of 76.8% of the finance office fees for the people who work at the downstairs counter, because they're monitoring and posting payments and invoicing for utilities and property taxes as well. No overtime pay again. The other portion of the health insurance buyouts from above is down here. Office supplies for windows, return envelopes, appropriated paper for utility invoicing. It's a big item, 12,750. That's the estimate. Telephone allocation, the same as finance. Contract services, technology issues here where we have Tyler for Munis software, and that's up 3% over this past year. We have ClearGov for 27,000. That's the same fee as this current year. The VCC software for bulk mailing, roughly the same as this year. Quading annual postage meter fee, that's the same as this year. And then this messaging software, a small charge for $30. So I think the lion's share of the contract services will be, out of pocket services. The only savings in this area could be ClearGov if we cut back on that particular cost of the budget module and the digital budget book, which we're currently not really using. And I think we've had to use it since we started. We're using the transparency piece, which might cut that down to about $10,000 or $11,000 for us. So it's one thing to think about. If we're not going to use it, we could probably start paying for it, which would be that. Printing and copying, once again, Simquest managed service on the printers. We got Glens Falls National for lockbox fees. It's probably 2,000 payments roughly a month that are taken into the lockbox and applied directly to the accounts, and the files uploaded so we can post the applications. It saves us one person in processing payments. And mail handling equipment servicing, we put an estimate in there for $1,000 each year. That's in case we have any issues with our postage machine or with our inserted machine. And then the postage for mailing out all the invoices, is the last item. So the operating expenses for that department is $559,730, and that's up from $533 this year. And then we have some increases in salaries issued, and we also have increases in technology fees from yes. So we're $1,038,559 total. Right now, we're at 839 for the year for 2023. Any questions? Concerns, comments?
So the ClearGov, you said we could get rid of that since we're not using it that much?
We're using the transparency piece, which is mostly narrative. I've got the debts, service obligations out there, and it does carry our actual expenses and revenues for multiple years. People can look at it in transparency piece. As far as the budgeting for the city, as well as the digital budget book, which means you do the budget in one application. You pull that information over to the digital budget and then add all your ancillary reports in that say, here's what we're doing with capital projects, here's what we're doing for debt service and so forth. We're not using those pieces, and they're the majority of the cost. So we could drop those two pieces and save some money.
My opinion.
It's up to the council.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's.
Yeah, look at
The
that.
council originally wanted a clear gov. As a
I don't-
substitute for units, because everybody said units is too hard or too complicated or too detailed.
Yeah, I don't find myself using this on a day-to-day basis.
Clear gov.
I mean, it's the transparency piece, I get that, it's nice to have that.
Yeah.
For anybody who wants to see it, but
Yeah.
as far as, us using that, we sit here and do this, we go over it, fine tooth comb. We really need that extra piece, I don't know, that's just my own opinion.
I'm in agreement with you.
Speak for everybody
I
else.
mean, we had a look up and we didn't use that. And we've got clear gov. Now we're not really using the majority of that. But the transparency piece, we obviously can keep. but
Right, yeah.
We're not gonna use the budget book and the digital budget book.
I see what. It's.
Now, they give us the cost for transparency and the two budget books together. And I think it's
$9,000
a
discount.
$9,000 discount from the total of those three that gets us down to 27. So we'll take the discount away and we'll supplicate the transparency, which I think is roughly 10 or 12,000. So it's
Yeah.
So that's something to think about. We can make a change to the budget if you guys want to do that.
We can make that adjustment and add to the mayor's side, that when it gets like, say, that the council can review.
Well, I'm pretty frugal, you're not losing it, right? Oh, absolutely. Well, we've given it a chance at this point to be used, so at this point, it's still languishing.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we
Sure,
had
that.
open go before this, that kind of.
Yeah.
Fell by the wayside too.
And the actual information will still show up under transparency for the revenues and expenses for prior periods and the current period. And then also the debt service pieces and then it shows you the debt sitting now. I'll update that after the beginning of the year when we have our year-end debt in place and we'll go up a lot. It's gonna go up probably about 10 million. Excuse me. Wait a minute, not 10 million. About 9 million. So, but it shows, who owes what by what fund and everything, and it's a good disclosure of what the city owns.
Yeah, I think that piece is really helpful and important to have, but the
Okay,
rest.
so we'll get a quote from BeerGov on what they'll charge for just the transparency without the other two modules, but it will be a savings.
Great, thank you.
Okay,
Anything to say?
any other questions? Thanks.
Oh, okay.
It's still there. Go ahead.
Okay, everybody ready to start with CD? Okay. All right, so starting with the revenue lines, commitment fees for the DRI, that entire initiative is winding down, we're expecting additional revenue there. Athletic field and park fees, I will touch on that when we get to the rec complex fund. The farmers market rental is set at $500 a year, and the community development reimbursement that relates to grant funding that has salary reimbursement provisions attached to it. The city did expect to receive some of that funding this year. We don't expect to receive any next year. We've got many active grants, but none of them have that salary component to it, so it shouldn't be anything like 2024. CD regular payroll, that covers the director, our senior clerk, and our planning assistant. Overtime payroll set at a little less than 2% of the overall payroll budget. The vehicle supplies and vehicle parts, that covers what comes up from time to time with the loan vehicle that we have remaining under CEO. 1,500, 1,000 for technical and office supplies, which is pretty standard for the office. The telephone, I leave that number to Rich as he allocates it according to how many lines that we have. Contracted services covers a number of
renewing software licenses, and also covers any number of things that come up from year to year related to planning activities and minor studies that we need to have done to evaluate the viability of one proposal or another. The 3220 for printing and copying, that comes right from the management services contract, and the $300 for postage. For economic development, we have 1,500 in there for technical and special materials and supplies, and that is intended to cover software licenses related to GIS and a couple other conversations that Alicia is having to try and bolster the planning office's software suite. The $65K for contracted services covers Barton and Lejudas' grant writing and administration contract, which, and to give the council a heads up, that was originally a 2-year contract. It is coming to its expiration date, I believe, in May of 2024. There's currently about $30,000 left on the $169,000 total contract. That may be used up before we get to the end of the term. So I would expect at some point over the winter or in the spring to have a proposal to renew that contract under the council. Conferences, that covers both travel for CD staff, the senior planner, and also any members of the planning board who wish to attend conferences to keep up on their continuing education requirements. And celebrations, all that funding has been rolled over to the mayor's budget.
Under community engagement budget.
Yeah, correct. Before I go into rec complex, any questions on CD or economic development?
Well, it seems pretty straightforward, but I guess the only question would be, you know, when it comes to those higher line items, the contracted services for each one, is there anywhere in there that we can trim things down, or is that pretty much a stable number?
The 35K is a stable number, but I can take a look at where we stand for this year to see if there's any way we can reduce that for next year.
One also a fairly sizable chunk of the CEO budget that was removed as part of the process of moving parks and beautification and the Parks and Econ over to DPW. There was a small section of parks, city park, I think it was like city parks or parks.
It was city recreation parks. That
It
was
was
the,
in the CEO budget, as well as under
Yeah.
rec complex. So there was a little bit of confusion when the recreation department was dissolved. Some of that work got plopped into the CDO budget. But the people maintaining the parks were being hired out of DPW. What we did this year was we just did the final cleanup. We took those line items out of the CDO budget and put them in the DPW budget. So there would be a reduction in CDO, but that there would be an equal increase into the DPW budget.
okay, we're going to rec complex. Beach admissions, this year, we came in at about 88,000 and change, but we had a pretty awful summer for weather, so we could reasonably expect that to increase marginally in 2024. The Wilcox Dock Marina revenue, 28.5, that assumes a full roster of slip rentals, which we've seen over the past several years. The marina revenue, that is from the primary city marina, that 35K is included as a placeholder because the management agreement that the city signed in 2020 with the Plattsburgh Boat Basin is coming to the end of its term. Actually, I think it expires at the end of this month. We are in discussions with the new owners of the boat basin, Oasis Marinas, on a renewal of that agreement, but it will likely include a revised mechanism for profit sharing and revenue allocation. So when those details are available, certainly that will come to the council for approval. Parks revenue, that is what we anticipate in field use fees under the revised field use policy that was instituted late last year. Temporary investments, Rich, do you know what that 5,400 is for under RCX?
That would be for the surplus cash, which they would have probably half a year's worth that's in the reserve account right now at the interest rate we're currently experiencing. So that can change if the interest rate goes up or down, obviously that'll change, or if we use more of the funds or less of the funds, but that's just an estimate at, you know, having about half the balance throughout the year.
Gotcha, thank you.
You're welcome.
Rental on real property, that 3,000 is the annual license fee for the Cabana Beach Bar. We hope to see them return next year, but I think that would be number 13 in a row for them. Commissions, that anticipates the profit sharing mechanism that the city and YMCA have worked out for their lease of the city recreation center. They've been running pretty close to even, but we haven't seen much come back to the city from that profit sharing mechanism, so I put 1,000 in there just to be conservative. A couple minor numbers going down to the 445,000 from the general fund, and that is the interfund transfer from the general fund to make good the operational deficit for the RCX fund as a whole between revenues and expenses.
Councilor Bond, this is the local trend that we talked about last time.
Yeah, thank you.
That number came out lower than last year's actual, or this year's plan, right?
A little lower.
A little lower,
Yeah,
okay. That's a good sign.
that's a good sign. All right, for RCX admin, the 54K in regular payroll, that is for our sole remaining full-time RCX employee, our recreation leader. Some money in there for overtime as he gets bumped around a lot during the summer and can't always, get everything done in 48 hours. Minor requests for office supplies, personal clothing, equipment, printing and copying, and postage. Going down to the beach, regular payroll, the 7,500, that relates to DPW's time at the beginning and end of the season when they bring their heavy equipment out to the beach and move sand around and do a lot of the heavy prep work. The 130,000 in temporary payroll, that covers the entire lifeguard staff and also the seasonal laborers that we hire for the beach. And that is significantly higher than in past years. That is due to several factors, one of which being we raised the hourly rates for all of our lifeguards by roughly 30% to keep pace with what was being offered by the State Beach and the YMCA. That allowed us to keep a full-time, fully staffed beach all season long. One of the consequences of that pay raise was we were able to hire a much more reliable staff. So just about every day this year, we had enough lifeguards to open all 3 swimming areas. When there weren't enough swimmers to justify that, we had the lifeguards with other tasks, doing walk arounds up and down the beach, checking on other safety issues and dealing with the invasion of water chestnuts that were washing up on the beach all summer long. The capital outlay, that is a portion of the proceeds from the sale of the chaplain's house over on the Oval, which we have been slowly drawing down when there are issues with the buildings or with the infrastructure within the beach grounds. So that's just being carried over into the next year. Technical and special materials and supplies. We keep 6,000 in there because there are specialized equipment that we do have to either buy or replace on a pretty regular basis out there relating to the lifeguards work. Electric and natural gas, water and sewer, that's for the vendor building and also for the Southern Bathhouse. 10,000 in contracted services, that's a pretty standard number that we use each year. Fees for services as well, about 1,500 for that. And the telephone charges 30,355. That relates to the direct fiber connection that we have to the beach, which is how we are able to provide free public Wi-Fi to everyone there. You'll notice that the crate budget lines have been completely removed from the budget, so that should no longer be an encumbrance upon the city going forward. For the gym, the 11,000 in capital outlay, that is what remains of the 94,000 that was approved in 2023. And that 94,000 was the other portion of the proceeds from the chaplain's house, which we dedicated as a kind of drawdown fund for the things that can definitely go wrong in the gym. That's a very old building and things go wrong very often. We drew that down significantly this year, which is why you'll see a commensurate increase in the lines for technical and special supplies, and ground supplies, just to make sure that we have sufficient funding in there to cover those things as they come up over the course of the year.
I think in 2024, we'll need to have a very serious discussion about the future of that building. And whether or not the city is gonna continue owning and maintaining that, we have the rec center on the.
Oh, yeah.
We really have no. Clear long-term use or need to continue owning that building. The rec center is being leased out to the YMCA. And right now we function solely as landlords. And I philosophically, I see no reason for the city to be landlords for that building, especially if we can offload it to an agency that's serving our community that can use it better than we are.
And one other point to add on that front, there is a draft feasibility study for repairs, well, really replacement of the entire roof of the city gym. I'm awaiting incorporation of a few comments from our consultant for that. That will be part of the discussion. Whether the council wants to continue, managing that building, or they want to go a different way. So I would look for that later this year. And one other note on the gym, you notice the 30,000 in telephone expenses. That is because there is also a direct fiber connection to that building, which the city maintains responsibility for. For the marina, we keep pretty standard numbers in place for this from year to year because the city's operational responsibilities are very minimal. Although there are maintenance items that come up for which we are responsible, so we leave about 14 or 15K in there each year to cover those expenses as they come up, spread over the materials lines and also the contracted services line. And that's it for rec councilors.
Why do we offer free internet?
There was a provision in the lease that the city signed with the YMCA that they assumed all utility expenses except for natural gas and the direct internet connection. If the YMCA were to ever change or once increase service on that front, then they would be responsible for taking it over
Why do we offer it?
as a courtesy to the public.
A lot of people's phones don't really, I mean, I don't mind it, and I can get right on 5G without having to pay for internet.
Yeah.
I just.
We also have our recreation leader set up his office seasonally in the beach, which requires a direct connection to the city's IT infrastructure. That's the other component of it. A lot of money for.
I think, in my opinion, that is a little bit of an extravagance, but that's just. My opinion, because most people's phones these days, you can separate on.
Well, at the beach, we have
So,
Canadian visitors and everything. Sometimes their cell phones don't work so well down here, so, so the Wi-Fi would help them communicate.
Right, but I don't know if that's worth, I mean, we gotta look at like what the cost benefit is as far as, being quite a bit of money to have that out there.
well, 30,000.
Yeah, a lot of those costs in there, not just the Ethernet connection and usage for those areas, it's also the managed backup IT costs, that we share those based on telecommunication expenses. We're looking to have that go down pretty dramatically this year because there's $3,500 a month we're paying for Google training that we're not using. So that's $42,000 a year. We can take off the entire phone telecommunication cost for the whole city. So that allocated reduction there, as well as looking at different locations and having them charged in the past in public works as gathering some of the active costs. So there's going to be some reductions in there. We're going to look at what that's going to be based on a calculation to do an adjustment, say at the mayor's budget level. I'll work on that this tomorrow. We're going to start looking at it and I'll continue for that for next week. But I think we're going to across the board reduce those telephone / telecommunication with the effect is pretty dramatic.
That's good to know, but Richard, would it be possible when you get us that information, since it does seem like would you be able to isolate for us what the cost is of providing the internet to the beach?
It's 299.77 a month. For the Ethernet connection at the beach, and then another connection cost like that at the gym. So it's about 3,600 a year.
Okay, so out of this 30,355,
Right.
only about 3,600 is actually supplying the internet to the beach.
Correct.
Okay, that's a lot different.
And the other part is,
Support.
It's in question,
Managed backups, secure services, and firewall services, and protection that are spread out throughout the city. It's not just carried in one department, though, because every department uses like those IT services, it's spread out amongst all of us. Right. But we will, like Richard said, there's a couple other services that we started off with that support. We no longer need, those are dropping off. There's also managed backups of servers, file servers that we're now finalizing the transition to Google Drive, where again, those managed services, those managed backups, as well as firewall services are no longer going to be needed. That should also reduce that contract service for IT support.
yeah, I mean, itemized, I wouldn't have, absolutely, obviously, I wouldn't have said anything, but I mean, the whole 30,000 jumped out like.
That's a big
Yeah,
number.
same.
Yeah.
But that really helps clarify it to
Yeah.
know that. Because 3,600 to provide them with Wi-Fi, a little more reasonable.
Exactly.
Google training, when I use it, should reduce the whole thing by about 12.5% across the board, across the city. I mean, it's 42,000 a year that we're not even using. So,
We were using it, we were definitely reusing it and needed to use it when we made that transition. It was always the case that, after we get through this transition, there's some support that people might still need here and there, but we don't need it as
yeah, monthly costs.
we don't need it as much as we did that.
So we'll be able to update that reflection as we continue to work on this.
Yeah, because we're gonna ask to make sure that Google training cost, $3500 a month, gets removed from that one invoice from Cintas for 2024. So that's gonna be a significant reduction. It's 42,000 a year against our total cost, which is in there for phone and it's about 375,000 a year, 360,000 a year. So there's some relief coming there.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
No, sorry, it's that climactic there at the end.
That was it.
That's it.
I don't think anybody's gonna be mad about being done.
Next week, I believe we have, couple more. And, again, as we go through this, please, like, this is a great dialogue, we know to go back and make some adjustments, changes, reductions. Happy to do that, you can do that, I have received a couple of emails, for consideration into this budget, those will be, considered and added. With some, notes as well as, any additional information I can provide, but, do appreciate the time.